4 o'clock hour, the bumper-to-bumper program. Russo in about an hour. Goessling at 4:30. Lavelle is scheduled for 5:30. I got a couple football things I got to get off my chest. But before we do, I went down this road last week. I thought I was going to be done with it, but apparently I'm not. Because it's kind of it's a growing form of performative art, performative politics. This supposed migration to Blue Sky. By the way, somebody has already apparently created a fake Barrero Blue Sky account. I think it's somebody who texted me a few days ago, said he was going to create one, and then he was going to charge me like $20, I guess, to gain control of the domain. I ain't giving you $20. All I can tell people is that I'm not really on Blue Sky. I'm not telling you to not be on Blue Sky, but I'm officially sick of people's proclamations on this. Similar to the I voted thing. Just do it. Because if you proclaim it, for me, you're looking for some measure of approval from the people that, like you, have decided that that's the place to go. And by the way, by all objective accounts, the one thing that Blue Sky has in common, or is the common trait of Blue Sky, is you're going to be around people you're going to agree with. And if that's what arouses you, God bless you. Does nothing for me. And you don't have to text me about the guy who runs X. We're familiar with him. We've talked about him. In some cases, we've ripped him. But you're not obligated to stay there either. But every metric I've seen indicates, in fact, that you show up on Blue Sky and you're immediately handed a list of people you're supposed to block. I'm going, Joe Colley had a great tweet on this. It's of the sort of, you could say, grow up concept. Let me see if I can find it. Let me scroll down here. I think I just saved it yesterday. Here it is. Joe Colley is a media member we've had on. Hadn't been a while since we've had him on. He used to spend part of the year here.
Yeah,
still.
His family lives here.
Family lives here,
yep.
And he still writes for the Chicago Sun-Times now. As journalists, our biggest fight is freedom of speech, and I'm seeing a lot of media personalities leaving X because it has too much freedom of speech. It's not about agreeing with different opinions, about a line that exist. Speaking of, toughen up, Buttercup, which I think we just heard from Carl Gerbschmidt in the form of it.
Yep.
I said, we're happy for you. Do it. You're not. I'm not impressed. I'm not going, I have to reconsider. It's not profound to say X is a cesspool. We get that. But I don't want antiseptic, which is what Blue Sky seems to be. And if it's important for you to not get your feelings hurt or get upset by opinions, and by some of them, by the way, outlandish as hell, because they're all over Twitter. We know that, all over X. But I think most of us have tried to say at some point as adults, we'll ignore the stuff that's stupid, or try to. We'll muck through it. But I don't need the validation of, now I'm in a place where everybody's civil and everybody agrees with me. God bless you if that's what's important to you. But I'll say again, I think a lot of the people who are doing it for the wrong reasons. I think they're doing it for the validation. I really do. This is what I'm somewhat of my mentality. This is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what my friends are doing. So I want to be validated. I want to stay with the in-group that says, no, Blue Sky is the way to go. I want to get patted on the back. So let me know when the first I switch to Blue Sky stickers or lapel pins start appearing, because they're inevitable, are they not?
T-shirts for sure.
There's no question.
Find me on Blue Sky. Follow me on Blue Sky. Just because of this, I'm going to delay my look for me on Blue Sky announcement until tomorrow.
And I've said to media
people... I don't even know how to find Blue Sky.
Media people, to me, have a right to go on as many different, because if they're in the business of, I just want people to be able to reach me if they're interested in what I have to offer, I don't think anybody can get mad at that. That, from a media standpoint, that's what you're going to do. It's too much work for me at this point. And the more I'm told I need to do it, the more I'm told that this is what the righteous people are doing, the less likely I have any inclination. I'm not a mob guy. I don't care which mob it is. I'm just not interested necessarily in mobbing it up. Here it is. Here's another. He thinks this is profound. X is just a disgusting cesspool. A lot of life is exactly that. It doesn't mean you have to be contaminated by it. You use your brain. You use your head. Every day we dismiss some of the stupidity that is offered up on X. Every day. And adults, I think most of us figure, okay, there's ways for us to do exactly that. I don't need the peace and tranquility of a place where, they're all going to agree with me. We're all in the same place politically. Golly, this is fun. Of course it is. You're just going to basically reinforce each other. Have at it. Enjoy the hell out of it. I never thought, by the way, speaking of polarizing, I never thought that last night's National Football League game would be polarizing. And going in, it felt like, well, God, this is a weird matchup because Cleveland's buried.
Yep. Pittsburgh's
good, but it's like, well, why couldn't they have flexed out of this game? Whatever. But the game got interesting for a lot of people because a tsunami broke out, right off the lake. Is it Lake Erie?
I think
Cleveland?
that's
I think it's
Cleveland.
Lake Erie.
Yep.
Yeah, Calcutta Clipper. And most of the game I watched, certainly most of the second half, it was crazy how hard it was snowing. Visibility was difficult. And yet it ended up being a really entertaining game where both teams were able to move the ball. Pittsburgh coming back, from way down, and then Cleveland responding, right, with their backup QB, the kid who used to be in New Orleans. And yet, the debate that broke out that shocked me was there were people in my business or in the media business who said, this is awful. Football shouldn't be played like this. It's not, people are slipping around. You can't see yardage markers. And this isn't football. I want to see the players at their best. And the players at their best are playing in perfectly pristine conditions. What's wrong with people? In all seriousness, because the fact is, most games are going to be played under those conditions anyway.
Yeah.
Football, any of these sports to me, but especially football, because of what it has represented historically, should be about an aesthetic. And the aesthetic last night was marvelous. The idea that for one game, I'm going to look back and be haunted. I'm not sure we saw the best that the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers could offer because the field wasn't in perfect shape. What world do you live in? Enjoy the moment. The fact that it is unusual to have a game like that, even if, to an extent, you're not getting the best in pristine conditions that they might have offered, who cares? What brought you to the game? To me, what should bring you to the game are interesting aesthetics, unusual circumstances, whether those conditions have to do with the field, the weather, officiating controversies, whatever the case may be. I thought it was wonderful last night. Now, maybe I'd get sick of it if it was game after game after game. I don't know. But the idea that even that, although I'm sure on Blue Sky, everybody agreed that it was wonderful. So maybe I should have been on Blue Sky and I wouldn't have been as agitated as I was on X, the cesspool. But I'm going, what are you worried about? What are you protecting? This idea of, do we want to see these players at their best? Well, first of all, you see who's playing. It's a 2-8 team on one side, and it's like, just be able, have enough child in you still to just be lost in the moment and say, well, this is fun. Let's see where this goes. And as it turns out, my guess is the audience built because of the unique conditions and the fact that both teams were scoring despite the conditions. The game was nip and tuck going back and forth. Somehow a game that had seemingly no meaning ended up being worth staying with to the end.
The Steelers, by the way, can't win on Thursday night. As great as Tomlin is, apparently they've lost this game like 10 times in a row. I didn't realize that. The Steelers aren't very good on the Thursday game for some reason. But, yeah, it was an interesting discussion because people were very angry about it, and then people like you were saying this is the greatest snow globe game I've ever seen. And we celebrated it other times. In the playoffs, this happens once a year, right? At least.
Yes, exactly.
There's always going to be, whether it's an AFC North game or an NFC North game or an AFC East game, if it's in Buffalo, there's always going to be a game where weather is going to be a big part of it. What started the whole Patriots dynasty was a snow game. The tuck rule game.
I don't know how we lose that sense of wonder. The idea that we're such purists that, well, how can I really measure what I saw if these players were not given the opportunity to play with clean uniforms, where they didn't have to worry about changing their cleats in perfect conditions? And I'm going, what do you watch this stuff for? Do you really think there's that much at stake? It's a bleeping football game, and it's a unique one that people are going to be long after they forget games, probably against two better teams, or a game that at least matches two good teams. They're going to be talking about this one. In fact, I give Jameis Winston credit for it, too, because before game, after game, he seemed to be reveling in all of it in a way that was, I think, kind of charming for a lot of people, right?
He's a vibe.
Yeah, there's no question. He had, I guess I was unaware of the vibe that he is. And, he did throw the killer interception, although he came back from it. He had a chance to come back from it.
That's Jameis.
Which is Jameis. That's part of the Jameis experience. But, man, it's just... Well, a couple people are saying it, including Willow, Mark Rosen's cat guy. Maybe this is the scourge of fantasy football.
Yeah, and gambling.
For a lot of people, that's what it comes down to. It's like, well,
needed more than 59 yards from Nick Chubb, although he had two tutties.
He did. He'd have two tutties. Is that what they call him in the business now, tutties?
That's what the kids say.
Let's make this the mid 4:15 pause and come back with a shorty. I'll get to some texts and maybe even a done as item that got my attention. And then we'll prepare for Ben Goessling for the very latest on the Vikings. And by the way, it's official. Our blocking tight end, who actually has turned into a decent receiver as well, Josh Oliver, is out.
He's out, and Brock Purdy is officially out for the Niners. It's something called Brandon Allen.
Oh, it's not Pasternaut.
It's not Pasternaut.
So he would be the sub to the sub.
Yes.
If Brandon Allen struggles.
Correct.
Interesting.
You're listening to Barrero on The Fan.
We're just interested in the proverbial echo chamber. That's all we care about. And I prefer mine to not be as apparently duckies and bunnies as I'm told that Blue Sky is. Maybe it'll evolve into something else. Maybe it'll change into something else. That's not an endorsement. I don't know how many times I've said it about what I'm still on, but the one thing I think I can count on is anything I read, anybody might be getting ripped at any particular point. And I don't need Lord knows this last election should show the stupidity of just living in that world of reinforcement of what we want to hear.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
I don't think this is onion material. I don't believe it. Duct-taped banana artwork by Italian artist Mauricio Catalan. Just sold at Sotheby's auction for $6.2 million.
Where are we, America?
It is literally an unpeeled banana duct-taped to a wall.
Are you nuts?
Now, anybody who's listened to this show over the years knows I'm a humanities guy. I'm a culture guy.
You respect the arts.
I have nothing but immeasurable respect of all the arts, including art, including literature. Truth be told, sports would probably be fourth or fifth down the road for me compared to those other things. So this isn't somebody mocking culture and the importance of it. I'm a liberal arts guy. And by the way, we're dinosaurs. I mean, there's a lot of colleges where they're not even offering liberal arts educations anymore. What? Liberal arts? What the hell is that? What do you do with that? So I'm not anti-arts, but I do need some help on this one. It's not the first time this has happened historically, but it's the latest example that's getting some attention. $6.2 million for a banana duct taped to a wall. Or maybe it's a frame. I don't know. It looked to me like it was just a wall. Do we have? I mean, is it the concept of, well, if the right and influential people emphasize it enough or make a big deal of it, then it becomes a big deal. I mean, there may be people out there who say, well, what's so special about the Mona Lisa? Why did it become so iconic? Was it remarkable work? Or was it a bunch of experts, blue bloods decided it was mythic and then everybody else went along with it? Now, I would like to say, even if there's something subjective and arbitrary about all of these examples of what great art is, that it looks to me like the Mona Lisa did involve more talent. Crafting, drawing, easeling, the Mona Lisa looked to me like that's going to take a little bit more than I'm going to put a banana against a wall and I'm going to duct tape it with a certain kind of duct tape. Maybe that's the key. Is it gray duct tape?
Yeah. It's just the regular duct tape that you would get, when you and I go to Ace again on that random day when we both ended up at Fratelloni's Ace Hardware. Who's less likely to be there?
Yeah.
Did you see who bought it?
Did not. Mark Cuban?
No, not Mark Cuban. But the guy who bought it, he's a crypto guy. He's a crypto billionaire.
Oh.
And he announced he plans to eat it. He's going to buy it, and then he's going to eat it, the banana.
So is it a real banana?
Yes. This is his ex-post.
Okay.
Cesspool. I don't know if this is true
He
or
would
not.
never say this he'd never be allowed to write this on Blue Sky.
He can't get an account.
No.
This is not just an artwork. It represents a cultural phenomenon that bridges the worlds of art, memes, and the cryptocurrency community.
To be honest with you, whoever bought it was going to have to eat it because it was going to degrade, wasn't it?
Probably.
I mean, you can't great artworks, masterpieces, they work with stuff to try to preserve it.
That's true.
I don't think if you put the banana duct taped inside of a glass frame, would that preserve the banana or would it still degrade and rot?
Yeah, it would probably degrade and rot. You're right. So I guess that was his only choice. I hope he puts some of his vast funds into better operations or more meaningful operations. I hope he's very philanthropic. I'm not going to tell anybody to do with their money. It's your money.
No, it's his money. It's his business. You'd like to, maybe he does and we don't know it. Maybe he's very philanthropic. Was it a bidding war?
It sounds like it was. Yes. After a battle with 6 others for the artwork, the founder of cryptocurrency Tron paid for the fruit of his labor, good writing, in crypto.
In crypto.
But yeah, 6 other people were interested in it.
Austin in Apple Valley, the famous Savannah Bananas took full advantage of this. Sweet tweet below, sold out in minutes. We were offering the Savannah Bananas limited edition duct tape banana shirt for $62.40. Only 62 available of this collector's item, and this will never be available again.
Good job.
It's a great job.
That's opportunistic. Good job.
Let's make this the bottom of the hour pause. We'll get a Vikings report during this stretch and get more Vikings reporting from Ben Goessling with the very latest Vikings injury news coming up. Questions for Ben Goessling. Hit the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line 64686. He's brought to us by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. You and your prediction for the weekend for Sunday I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. You have picked the Vikings to win, but it appears to me you're expecting a squeaker. Or do you look at it as, Vikings will be up 10 and then maybe the Bears will score a late meaningless touchdown? What do you think?
No, I think it is a squeaker. I think I picked the Bears to cover technically, but I do not think this is a backdoor cover. I think this one will be tight. It typically is at Soldier Field. I think the Bears do enough things defensively that will make life a little more clunky for the Vikings offensively than they'd like. And then I think Caleb Williams played well last week. It seems like they've been able to get things working a little better for him with Thomas Brown calling the plays. So, no, I think this is kind of your classic Vikings go to Soldier Field, and it's not pretty. It's not one that they come out feeling like they had their best game of the year kind of thing. I think this one will be tight most of the way.
So Josh Oliver, I think, has been proclaimed officially out. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so does that have any meaningful impact on how much you expect the Vikings to run. The Vikings running game has been in retreat. They ran a bunch a couple weeks ago, but really not great yards per attempt. That number has gone down pretty steadily after a very promising start. Bears have been awful against the run, especially the last few weeks. So if Oliver's not there, does that change how aggressive they might be in the running game, or what does one thing have anything to do with the other in your mind?
I think it does, in the sense that they may have a harder time being as effective. I do think Oliver's ability in the running game, I mean, simply his size. I mean, he's an awfully big tight end that is a force on the line, particularly on a line that needs a little bit of muscle sometimes. So I think he has helped quite a bit there. And I think they will continue to run the ball because, like you mentioned, the Bears have not been very good against the run. In fact, a couple weeks ago when the Cardinals ran for, I think, 200 plus on them, that has happened enough where they have just gotten kind of run over that I would expect the Vikings will continue to do it. But I think it's a harder task without Oliver. I really do think he has made a difference for them in that facet of the game. I think they'll have Johnny Munt in those situations. I think they'll have CJ Ham. We'll probably see a little more of TJ Hawkinson in that regard. But Oliver's best trait that he brings to this offense is certainly as a run blocker. And I think not having him does change things a little bit for them in terms of how effective they can be. And then if they're not effective, do they stick with it, or do they say, you know what, we got to go to some other things? I think that's always where the inflection point comes for Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, and what's interesting about Oliver, he's I think maybe you expected this all along, but I thought in general he has been better catching the ball than I expected. Yeah. I viewed him as one of those guys who literally he'll never throw to him, but I don't remember him dropping very many passes.
No, he's been more effective there. I mean, I remember when they signed him, he kind of said, everybody typecasts me as a blocking tight end only, but part of that was when you're in Baltimore and it's Lamar Jackson, you're that's going to be the bread and butter of that offense. So you get put into that type of a role because that's what they're going to do. And he always has said, I can be a receiving tight end too if people kind of give me those opportunities. I think that he's not going to be, TJ Hawkinson, Travis Kelce, George Kittle type, but he has been effective there. I think, on the bootlegs that they like to run to him quite a bit, it's been something they can go to fairly often, and he makes some plays downfield. I think he has shown a little more depth to that part of his game this year when he's had opportunities to do it. And, Hawkinson not being available for the first part of the season probably creates some of those opportunities, but really a lot of it has come for him since Hawkinson has come back. I mean, when they have had those two tight end sets, that's been a lot of where he has done some damage in the passing game too. So yeah, I do think he's not a guy that gets a ton of attention, but they talk a lot about what he means to that offense as a whole. And I think not having him is a bigger loss than people might think, just because of you can't look at that one just on the name recognition and say, oh, that's no big deal. I do think that one matters for Sunday.
It's no secret where the Bears had at least some measure of improvement offensively last week. It's get the ball out of the quarterback's hands fast, even if it's a 5-yard play. You got some receivers certainly who can make some play, who can do some damage after the catch. So logically, one would assume then from the beginning, the Vikings, the B-flow plan is going to be, well, we're going to be sitting on everything. We're going to run whatever risk there might be about getting the ball deep because we're going to trust our pass rush enough that they're not going to have time, or their quarterback Caleb Williams is not going to have time to just drop back and wait. And he might even be a little bit skittish on the basis of the number of times he's been sacked the previous couple of weeks. That I would think that's the approach, right? Because that's all really the Bears proved last week, is that getting rid of the ball quickly, short passes, we got something going. So why not sit on that and make them, beat you some other way, no?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the interesting thing with Brian Flores is they do, for as aggressive as they are, a lot of the approach they want is for the ball to come out quick and go short so they don't have to defend over the top. I mean, it's a different way of doing it rather than putting your safeties back in coverage, but a lot of their MO is let's pressure enough that people say, let's just take the short throws, and we're not able to get chunk plays. And you kind of get to the same place just with a different approach to do it. So I think you'll see the Bears try to get rid of the ball quickly. It'll be a lot of the stuff to DJ Moore. We'll see how Keenan Allen is looking. He's limited after an ankle injury that popped up on Friday, I believe. So that's certainly worth watching through the weekend. But yeah, I think they'll try to get it out. I think one of the things to watch is we have seen the Vikings, especially Andrew Van Ginkel, be able to fool people saying, hey, I got to throw the ball quick. I got to throw into a hot zone here because there's pressure coming, except he fakes that he's rushing and then drops into coverage and then is able to make an interception. We've seen that obviously a couple times this year, once with a young quarterback and once with a not so young quarterback. So I think they will have some of those things where they're trying to drop people into those throwing lanes and maybe get a couple turnovers out of Caleb Williams that way as well.
Is it 4 in a row or 5? How many in a row have we won at Soldier Field?
The last time they lost down there was 2019 when they lost to Chase Daniel and Stephon Diggs went AWOL after that for a couple of days. Yeah. So I believe I think they're going for 4. Let's see. They're going for 5 in a row.
I think it's 5.
20,
yeah, you're right. I think they won the last 4.
1, 2, 3. Yep. So the last 4 they've won.
Yeah. So as much as we've had a lot of craziness over the decades, really hasn't been quite as crazy lately. What's the wackiest or weirdest Bears Vikings game you remember covering at Soldier Field?
Oh man, it's funny. I just wrote about this at the end of my newsletter today. I figured this is the first time we've done this newsletter that the Vikings have gone down to Soldier Field, so this is a good time to kind of dump a lot of these old stories. There are a few that come to mind. I mean, the Diggs thing was after that game in 19, but 2016 comes to mind. That was the Halloween night game. That was when Mike Zimmer's eye issues started, and then they lose, and then Norv Turner quits a couple of days after the game. There was 2012. Adrian Peterson missed the bus to the stadium. Everybody freaked out a little bit. I saw him jump in a cab. I remember that was my first year on the beat, and that was one of the first kind of days that the game day news cycle, I got involved in that. Said, no, I saw him get in a cab. He's fine. And I don't think that was the only time that happened. The two that stick out to me the most, 2013, they lose on a touchdown with 10 seconds left. It was like a play that they had not worked on in the red zone all week. And we got into the locker room really fast after that game. And that is like the most tense locker room I've ever been in. Players were hot. Everybody was mad about what happened with the call, and nobody was ready. And, Chris Cook, I think, was the guy that gave up the touchdown. He walked out not wanting to talk. And there were a lot of players in that locker room that were trying to bite their tongues pretty hard. So that one sticks out. And then actually the next year in 2014, Mike Zimmer's first year there, the clock stopped working in the stadium. So the Vikings are trying to keep track of the game clock on the sideline, but Teddy Bridgewater is a rookie, and with like 3 or 2 minutes left, I think he throws one into the end zone. We're thinking, what is he doing? He thought time was about to be expired, and they were down, I think, by 8, and I need to throw one into the end zone to try to make a play. They didn't have to do that. He had enough time left, but they got so messed up with the clock. The Bears intercepted it, ran the clock out, won the game. But I think those 2 years for me, 13 and 14, were like, man, this is just not normal down here very often. So those are probably the ones that stick out the most.
The Favre year, the good Favre year, Guardsy may remember this too. Didn't we lose at Soldier Field? I thought we lost to the Bears there, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was
in overtime, I think.
Was it an OT? Okay. I don't remember that. I thought it wasn't like a high scoring game. And then,
later in the year.
But we did lose. Yeah.
We lost the next year too in 2010 when things were free falling.
Well, yeah. That's by that point it was bad. But yeah, I thought we and that's the thing. I mean, there have been some good Vikings teams that have gone there to lose. And I don't know how often the weather has been a factor. I think there's probably been a few mudder games or, windy days or rainy days, but it lately has actually been a lot more stable than we like to think, based on the recollections you have and even some of the recollections that I have going back. Hell, I remember 1 year, was it 1 year or 2, the Bears had to play their home games in Champaign. I remember driving to Champaign for a Bears-Vikings game. I want to say with Tice
0-2
as the coach, and I think they lost. I think the Vikings lost that one, if I'm not mistaken. In Champaign, Illinois. Is it 2002? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you had an interesting tweet. I think this was from yesterday, although maybe you also offered it up on Blue Sky. I apologize if I haven't seen you there yet.
Are you on there now?
Well, no. Well, I apparently I am without signing up because somebody has attempted to take the domain, somebody being wacky. I have no idea what they have said, and if people think it's really me or not. I don't even understand it. So I'm going to try to just ignore it for now, at least. Here's what you tweeted. This was from yesterday. Andrew Van Ginkel is tied for 5th in the NFL in sacks this year with 8. Jonathan Grenard is tied for 12th with 7 sacks while being tied for 6th in pressures at 26. The two players count for a combined $9.14 million against the Vikings salary cap this year. To me, as good an example as there is that this is the consummate ensemble defense, right? There may not be any name as big as Daniil Hunter was, but this is the whole is greater than the sum of the parts kind of defense, and those are two good examples at ridiculously reasonable contract rates, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, they have hit on a lot of those pieces that you heard them talk a lot before the season about players they thought would be uniquely good fits in what they want to do that other people may not value the same way. And Van Ginkel is as good of an example of that as there is. I mean, he was with Flores in Miami, and Flores knew about him, but not a guy that gets a ton of attention, not a guy that brings a lot of attention to himself. So probably not somebody that was going to be as much in demand. And I think the Vikings actually tried to sign him a year ago, but he went back to the Dolphins on a 1-year deal. But they get him on a relatively cheap 2-year deal, and he is I don't know that he's going to have the name recognition to get a lot of the postseason stuff that he probably deserves in terms of, whether it's Pro Bowls or All Pro or, awards, postseason, any of that kind of stuff. But he's in the mix as one of the best defensive players in the league between the sacks, the interceptions, the ability to create pressure from a lot of different places. And they, I think, saw him as somebody that could come in and be a good fit to do that. But yeah, they have hit on a number of those things where you're probably going to have a lot of these guys where when all of the Pro Bowl stuff comes out, fans are like, I can't believe he didn't get voted in. It's a little bit of a popularity contest, but I think the overall performance of this defense very much is predicated on those types of players that can do a lot of different things, that kind of see the whole picture just on the way that they like to play. I think Blake Cashman's certainly another example of this, that they hit on a lot of these free agents in the offseason just because they knew what they wanted for the way they were going to play. And a lot of those guys have come through pretty spectacularly for them so far.
Standard Heating and Air Conditioning brings us Ben Goessling every Friday. Don't forget, Russo Radio will join at the top of the hour. And we'll check in with Lavelle at about 5:30. So Power Pack broadcast the rest of the way, going the distance until 6:30. Is this a Justin Jefferson game?
It's going to be interesting to see, because Jalen Johnson talked a little bit this week about wanting to take on Jefferson, and the Bears typically do play a little more man coverage than we see from a lot of teams. It's a lot of single high safety stuff. So between those two things, maybe Johnson gets his chances to go one-on-one with Jefferson. They've missed each other quite a bit. But Jefferson said yesterday, he's like, I'm not going to believe that I'm getting the single coverage I want until I see it. And he thinks even though the Bears have shown they'll play some of this stuff, everybody's going to go back to the same thing where it's too high and try to take the ball away from him. He has had some big days against the Bears. He's had some big days at Soldier Field. I think if he gets his chances, even though Jalen Johnson's an awfully good corner, Jefferson has shown that there aren't many corners he can't make plays against. It'll be interesting to see how they play him. I mean, how physical do they get with him? That has kind of been the thing that he's struggled with at times, especially if there's a safety over the top. I think it could be a Justin Jefferson game, but teams seem so focused on taking him away that until the Vikings make somebody pay for it, either by going somewhere else or running the ball enough that somebody has to bring an extra guy into the box, it's hard to see it just changing overnight. I think they are going to have to force teams out of that way of doing things, especially as more teams say, well, we can control him, or we at least can keep him from killing us. So let's go back to it. I think there may be opportunities there, but it's also one of those things where it's happened enough that I kind of need to believe it before I think he's going to have all of the matchups to feast on that he might want.
All right, let's get as wacky as we can here down the stretch. Yesterday, we got into that the fun discussion of, well, if the Jets say they're done with Aaron Rodgers, would we be tempted? Would KOC, the quarterback whisperer, would there be a part of him, even though they had this plan in place? It seems to be in place that likely Darnold is going to go someplace else, right? And then we start the clock right away on JJ. Is there any part of you that thinks if there was the chance to secure his services, that KOC might be seduced by that, despite the fact that Rodgers did not play all that well this year and is clearly at this point, one of those guys you're going to roll your eyes every 15 minutes to have to be around him. Does he have enough quarterback, whisperer in him to say, God, 1 year with A-Raj? Maybe we could make beautiful music together. Outrageous to even think about, not worth the time of day, or something you've thought about?
I mean, it comes up because of all of the Favre and Rodgers parallels from the Jets to the Vikings, and I think Seifert was trying to stir the pot a little bit this week, so it came up in the media room after he did that. But I would have a hard time seeing it because of a couple of things. I think they would see him as, okay, how well is he going to work in this system of what we want to do? I think there's a certain way they want the position played. There's a certain way they want to operate, that the level of freelancing he might do would be hard to mold into their offense, especially if he's not doing it as well as he did when he was winning MVPs. I think a lot of that stuff he gets more leeway when he's Aaron Rodgers at his peak, maybe not so much now. And then I also think they have wanted for a while and have kind of budgeted for a while to have a few years of a cheap quarterback. I mean, you're paying Justin Jefferson $35 million a year. You're paying Christian Darrisaw. You're paying Hawkinson. It makes it a little harder to do on that type of a budget, and then staff that defense the way they want to do it, and probably fix the offensive line a little bit too, if you're paying Rodgers a lot of money. So is it impossible? No, because he's one of the greats of all time. And if you have a conversation with him, you're not going to turn the meeting down. But I think it's a little bit hard to see it, especially knowing what they think about J.J. McCarthy and where he could go. I mean, it is going to be interesting to see what they do, because they will probably have to go into the season with some veteran presence in that room. Is it somebody like Rodgers? I have a hard time seeing that. But, if there's a way to work it that they could pull it off, I guess I wouldn't rule it out. It just seems like that set of circumstances is hard to imagine coming to fruition.
How about,
so I know that I'd spend a ton of time worrying about it now.
I wouldn't call him a great veteran presence, but what about the possibility of our backup quarterback next year being Daniel Jones, the backup?
Well, I think that's maybe a little more likely. I mean, because I would think that, obviously that contract is not going to be the Vikings' problem going forward. So that maybe is a little easier to make happen. I think it's possible. I mean, that's one of those guys that they would maybe look at and say,
we could redeem him, right? KOC is the great redemption guy. Yeah.
Yep. I think there's the possibility of that. I think something like that probably makes a little more sense than Rodgers just knowing how much guardrail he'd want to take out. And I also wonder how much, these coaches all talk, and I don't know that O'Connell and LaFleur have crossed paths quite in the way that they would swap secrets with one another, but they do come from the same world. And I'm sure there's enough discussion among all of those coaches of, hey, what was he like to work with, that I don't think it'd be very hard for O'Connell to say, okay, if I were hypothetically going to do this, what would this look like in our building, and probably get some pretty candid answers. So
is this just for you another get in, get out business trip? Because I heard you during the pregame show after I wrapped up sermons that Nashville, as with a town as it's supposed to be, you basically got into no culture at all. It was, I'm there to cover the game. I'm going to get in. I'm going to get out. Is it going to be the same kind of business trip to the Windy City?
It's a little better than that. I am in, I think, later afternoon tomorrow. But the thing with all of the party trips with the Nashvilles or the LAs or the Vegases, they get booked up so fast. People book the flights, and flights get jacked up because all the Vikings fans go, which is great. But it makes it a little harder to do it. So I think by the time I booked that one, because I thought about bringing my wife and saying, let's make a weekend of it in Nashville. But by the time I got around to it, it was like, man, the only flight that I can even pitch to the bosses with a straight face is going to be this one late at night. And then the Monday morning thing, I hate those early morning flights. But yeah, it just was like, well, if we're going to make a vacation trip out of it, it's going to have to be another time. So that was a bummer. But yeah, I'll get in there tomorrow night, be able to get some good food, and then probably try to do that Sunday night as well. But yeah, it's got a little more time in Chicago than we did in Nashville. That was kind of a missed opportunity last weekend.
Well, try to have some fun, have a safe trip, and we'll chat next week. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you and yours as well, Dan. We'll talk to you.
We'll talk on the other end.
Week.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to figure out schedule because we're off both Thursday and Friday, but Guardsy will be in touch.
Yeah, we'll have your people call my people.
That's the deal. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
That's Ben Goessling, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Texter Andy, for the love of God, no Rodgers. He is a cancer to teams, thinks he knows it all and wouldn't listen to KOC. Plus, we don't have 10 Packers from a decade ago on our team. Pretty good text. Russo Radio is coming up.
Bumper to Bumper with Dan Barrero on The Fan.